If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives and cultures of the 13 vampiric clans in this world of darkness. This episode will focus on the clan of the hidden, Clan Nosferatu. Very few Canaanites evoke such visual horror and disgust than those belonging to my clan, Clan Nosferatu. Their natural guise resembles that of Count Orlok from the silent film Nosferatu, which is of no coincidence, similar to how the world knows of Dracula. Upon the embrace, the body of a fresh Nosferatu painfully warps and distorts into their new hideous form. The process can take several hours or several nights, as the limbs can elongate, eyes that bulge or sink into a new angular skull, teeth that become grotesque fangs that painfully protrude from some new malevolent maw, noses become snouts or disappear entirely, leaving a slitted cavern like a snake, arms and legs that bow at peculiar angles, and feet and fingers that become monstrous claws extending at unnatural lengths. It is a pain that many of our clan have endured, a process that can either break or make a Nosferatu mentally, as when they awaken, no longer in physical agonizing pain, they are often unrecognizable monsters. I say mostly, as the most recent of sewer rats just look ill or charismatically goth, which was caused by a marvel called the withering, a process where the power of blood has weakened in some kindred. In the case of the Nosferatu, they are not so hideous to look at. But you look confused. Ah yes, you have noticed that I referred to the Nosferatu as my clan, and yet here I am, fairly average looking. Whilst not unique to us, obfuscate is often seen as the Nosferatu's discipline, as it allows us to hide in plain sight and look more human, which is usual, as many a prince and baron deem the Nosy as a walking masquerade violation. It bothers me slightly that this dated viewpoint still exists with many elders, as both the kine and kindred have always partaken in the strangest of cultural fashions that deliberately make them look unattractive, and some Nosferatu are more handsome than some kine. As for I, what you see now is my mastery of the power, mask of 1,000 faces. Because of our appearance and the backward view of many a kindred, many Nosferatu seek to live in the underground, squatting in the sewers for protection in these modern nights. Some, like myself, manage to acquire a more pleasant accommodation on the surface. It is easy to get kind to do what you please when you have the added strength of potence to rip a spleen out of a difficult client, or command an army of hornets through the animalism discipline to scare someone into submission, or to fly into every orifice to eat their flesh from the inside out. That is rarely my approach, however, but I know there are many Nosferatu who take huge pleasure at embracing their new monstrous appearance. There are a handful of stories that define the existence of the clan and by extent our ugliness, which I will do my best to explain to you now. What is agreed amongst scholars is that the unique look of the clan comes from an Absimiliard, the name given to the Nosferatu antediluvian, who was embraced by Ziliar, the beautiful, the third child of Cain, and his first wife. He valued two things in his life, his prowess as a hunter and his remarkable beauty. The former caught the attention to embrace him, putting up quite the chase to find him, making the hunter the hunted. Ziliar would get her way, but leaving a scratch on Absimiliard's pretty face. He would grow angry and bitter at his wound, resulting in Ziliar to curse him with ugliness. Not wanting to put up with the abuse and bullying, he hid and embraced others like him, and the only way he could get his beauty back was to slay all of his descendants. I'm not a fan of this particular theory, as it seems far too simple to be true. The second story is an extended variation on the first. Absimiliard, like many of his future childer, was a loner, best known for being the best hunter in the land. The beautiful hunter would spend days in the wilderness to return with enough game to feed an entire village. The second generation was just as power-hungry as any other generation thereafter, wanting to build armies of the best Canaanite candidates they could find. Ziliar was certain that Absimiliard would not fall under such politics and enticed him with the offer. On the surface, becoming a vampire seemed like a fantastic idea. Near-perfect invisibility, additional strength, and the ability to command animals would make him the ultimate hunter. And for a time, he and the gangrel antediluvian would call nature their home, gallivanting in woodlands and pastoral greens, killing and hunting as kindred spirits, to pardon the pun. Over time, however, Absimiliard would stop feeling like a true hunter, as he could easily cheese his way to victory. When confronting Ziliar about his woes, her response did not soothe him. It angered him, and would begin to plot his revenge against her by building an army, falsely in her name, filled with murderers and killers who glorified in the killing and slaughtering of prey. Some of his more notable children were Baba Yaga, Vasiliar, and Echidna. No, not the animal, the half-snake, half-woman Greek monster. Absimiliard and his brood would be some of the leading figures in the slaughtering of the second generation. All of his childhood would remain loyal to him, except for one who managed to escape being bloodbound to him and became the modern incarnation of the Nosferatu clan. I'm fairly certain you have heard of her. Medusa is her name. The matriarch. Cain would obviously catch wind of the news of the slaughtering of his children, including his beloved Ziliar. He would punish the vain antediluvian with hideous features rather than killing him outright, bringing his inner monster to the surface. Whilst Cain considered the matter closed, the Nosferatu antediluvian would want more revenge, charging his monstrous Niktuku into wiping out all of the kindred. The Niktuku are considered a bloodline in these modern nights, one allegedly bound to Absimiliard. They lack the ability to gain sustenance from kine blood. If a Niktuku were to drain a human completely, they would only be capable of drawing sustenance from roughly a third of the blood drained. However, Cainite vitae nourishes them normally. Additionally, for every 100 years since their embrace, they become more monstrous in appearance. But their physical bodies also grow stronger until they reach the peak of human and vampiric physical potential. They grow slowly but decidedly bent, twisted, and even more deadly, slowly aging grotesques that blame the Nosferatu for their condition. As believable as this story may be, it does present a couple of interesting questions and points to consider. Where does the Nosferatu come into the equation if Absimiliard created the Niktuku? One theory comes that the now angry and bitter antediluvian encountered the most gorgeous maiden, cleaning her clothes by a riverside. Angry by just the sight of her, he embraced and abandoned her just out of spite, perhaps even for fun. It is said that this maiden knew of the kindred, knowing full well that she had become the damned. She would seek comfort from Ziliar, who gave her a place among the kindred, becoming the ally that she originally intended for Absimiliard. The maiden hid away, using her ability to spy on Ziliar's enemies and report back to her. The maiden and her child would gain their reputation as secret keepers and claimed a place within vampire society. And who was this maiden? Some kindred refer to her as the Mother, whilst there are some sources that suggest that she is Lilith. If this is true, it is a 4th generation vampire, a Methuselah, that is our clan progenitor. There are probably other 4th and generation Cainites who share a similar mindset to that of the Mother, but one is more likely to be sung Mozart's The Magic Flute by a unicorn than seeing such kindred. One should not remove the option of diablerie either, as many of our clan have unapologetically eaten their way to the top. There are many tales, as previously stated, many of them involving the strange connection between the Nosferatu and fairies, or how all the clans were monstrous looking and we were the ones stuck, as it were. But I will part with you one story that still sticks around, a story I believe is nothing more than uninspired hogwash, one I find most repulsive. This tale presents Absimiliard as a man so beautiful that no woman could resist him. The woman that he allegedly set for is Arakel, the first Toreador. Partaking in an epic love to put every love story to shame. Such lustful love was not to last, as Absimiliard would soon be cursed with the ugliness for reasons that are not explained within this carnation of the story, believe it or not. Arakel would be repulsed by such ugliness, surprise, surprise, refusing to be with her man. She would do her best, but it was the Orlok that pushed her away, ashamed by his vile visage. Now, You are entitled to believe which of the many Nosferatu tales are true, but if you believe that last one, you're either brain damaged or a toreador. No vagrant would have created such a diatribe. Only a toreador could conjure up something so tasteless. Oh, woe are the Nosferatu! If only we could be so pretty and witty that everything would just be okay. Fuck off. Seriously, fuck off with that nonsense. Most Nosferatu don't care about how pretty they aren't. Apologies, but I have a particular disdain for that myth. I should probably move on to about our golden age. The Ventru had Rome, the Bruja had Carthage, and did pretty good jobs at controlling the kind. We did too, but not in a similar fashion as those did. Whilst they dominated or presenced their way into the minds and hearts of the humans, many Nosferatu conquered much of Africa, convincing the poor bastards we were demigods that required human sacrifices. You may not have heard about the Nosferatu around these time periods, which doesn't surprise me. Most people only have an interest in the first world. The Nosferatu of old played into their superstitions, holding forests, crags, caverns and caves as their domains, places that the sun could barely touch them. We let the Setites have Egypt, of course. We protected the kind as much as we stalked and fed upon them, keeping ourselves to ourselves, shunning the rest of kindred society. Not much has really changed when you think about it. These simpler times were not to last, as the more refined and sophisticated kind from Europe started to claim Africa as their own fucking white people. Those who weren't killed or chased out of their homes were captured as slaves, one leper at a time. The African Nosferatu would come to appreciate the underground kingdoms the European ones had created that allowed us to hide from the status of low clan among the beggars and peasants of old. When the world and society moved into the Victorian period, it introduced the Industrial Revolution, which introduced industrial plumbing, which became massive sewer networks for us to call our homes. Many of us spend nights, rebuilding sewer networks, tunnels to our own particular specifications. We call these warrens. Whilst I have not called a sewer my haven in quite a long time, there is nothing better than having a place to call your own where you know that absolutely no one will hunt for you because their pride will get the better of them. There are very few Nosferatu princes and archbishops throughout history, which does not necessarily mean that we are not suitable candidates for position of power. We just command it in a more subtle way. The Nosferatu are not obsessed with power. I speak for many Orlocks that we are quite happy living in the shadows, as most kindred don't see us as a threat, whether you are an Anarch, Camarilla or Sabbat Nosferatu anti-Tripu, who are not so different from any other Nosferatu. Just the mindset and ethos are different. As I mentioned earlier, some sewer rats embrace the pretty out of spite, or to teach them a lesson in vanity. Most choose low-class individuals, those who are perhaps outcasts and can do with a restart on life. Many kind are embraced because of their technological skills, making them all the more valuable for our reputation as spy masters. This naturally leads us onto the little nugget called SchreckNET that allowed Canaanites to communicate via the internet. Version 1 was created by my friend Uncle Smelly, otherwise known as Gerald Raffin, who created a special network piggybacked off of the internet, so a little bit like a VPN in that regards. It was primarily used by us, the Nosferatu, to exchange information, trade secrets and keeping operations up to date. When it was hacked by a venture called Bobby Weatherbottom in 1990, Gerald opened up the doors to other kindred in the 2000s with version 2, where SchreckNET now began functioning as the secret web browser that many of you came to know it as. I never thought this was a good idea, and I was unfortunate enough to be right, as SchreckNET was compromised in 2004, where the NSA got in and took lots of data with them. The National Security Agency are responsible for the collection and analysis of intelligence in the interests of the United States of America. Since its inception in 1952, the NSA has become one of the most powerful, secretive, technological, advanced, and invasive of the world's intelligence agencies. Of course they are. They're fucking Americans. Now, if you think that is particularly grim, this contributed to the Second Inquisition's onslaught of kindred society between 2007 and 2008, resulting in the Camarilla to terminate SchreckNET. Older and more experienced Nosferatu hackers dismantled SchreckNET servers, beginning the removal of as much Canaanite communication as possible from the interwebs. Although they took a hit to their credibility and lost many clan members, the Nosferatu still remain a significant presence in kindred society. Just because SchreckNET is gone doesn't mean that its hackers went with it. Despite its presence long gone, many of us still miss the service. I know I do. Nosferatu gatherings are particularly awkward. We both hate the presence of kindred and yet long the presence of others of our own ilk. It is far more convenient to converse via a computer interface rather than dealing with somebody else's insecurities as well as your own. Such face-to-face meetings are few and far between, but they usually occur within certain factions that recognize similar outlooks and traits to form a group and label those who need help to create a sense of belonging other than Nosferatu. Bestials are the Orlocks I mentioned that have given up trying to fit in as kind or as human as they can muster, embracing the more primitive parts of their natures, seeking to make themselves look more like monsters. Like angsty teens that discovered the throat-slitting wonders that is punk music, this is merely a phase for the fledglings. A step further from this is to begin to distance yourself from humanity, thus embracing the beast more. Most common in the Sabbat, the Leatherfaces believe themselves to be monsters. It is not enough to just kill your prey. It is important they must be terrified of you before they are torn apart with claws, teeth, chainsaws, or any other improvised slasher horror film weapon they can muster. I have heard this faction referred to as butchers and rippers from time to time, although those names are particularly uncommon now. And I'm not entirely sure the origins of Leatherfaces either, although it wouldn't surprise me if it came from some horror film. The Cleopatras are the ones I spoke of who were embraced for being arrogant beauties that were meant to learn some lesson. Fagans are a sort of Nosferatu cult, desperate to be a part of some family. What makes them more of a cult than the other factions in the Nosferatu clan is their need to be bloodbound to each other. Some grow power-mad, becoming monstrous gods as a result. Whilst usually found within the Sabbat, that is not to say that Fagans are not a rarity within the walls of the Ivory Tower. Lore masters are those who are thoroughly obsessed with secrets, wanting to discover who and what they are and how they came to be. Some even go as far as spreading lies that only they hold the truth. It's through those pricks that we get love stories with our fucking Toreadors. Martyrs are very attached to their humanity, trying to cling onto it desperately, watching over their mortal families or for their loved ones, becoming some violent vigilante if need be. Their focus on humanity leads them to believe their monstrous change is some form of punishment, hence the referral of martyrs. There are some who do their best to pose as kind as much as possible, not so keen on living in the sewers with the rest of them. These are the skins, and they are very useful to the clan. They are often skilled actors, with many an alias prepared, some even going as far to build new lives outside of the Nosferatu. This is very dangerous stuff, as many obfuscate powers do not work against modern technologies, thus acting as walking masquerade violations. Regardless of who and where we sit in the world, how close we are to embracing the role of the monster or mortal, many kindred assume us as smelly creatures that are anything but humane. What most Cainites fail to remember, or choose to ignore, is that the Nosferatu are one of the more intelligent clans, perhaps the canniest of all the Cainites. We hoard information for and from all sorts of kindred. We even had a fucking website for it, but now that's gone. Although, an associate of mine in Los Angeles is having his charter started back up again, with the financial aid of the Baron of the Valley, whoever that may be. Kindred come to the Nosferatu for one of two purposes, to poke fun at us or to purchase secrets or favors. It is funny that we choose to be mutual towards them, given how nasty some of them can be. Rarely does someone check up on us to invite us degenerates to their parties. We assume the role of spy master, collecting information and exchanging it for anything they please. Whilst many of us do not want it, it is the Nosferatu that hold a lot of power over kindred, if not so direct as the La Sombra or Ventru. If you want something found, come to a Nosferatu, for they will be able to tell you what you want. It's similar to our setup now, isn't it? How ironic. To be kept updated, follow the Lore by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.